So it's like past midnight right now. Here I am, and I kind of have this thought that I wanted to record myself expressing, and it's about what are games today? How is the development of games right now, especially in my journey making my own? And that made me look back a lot to older games to play and compare it with what we get today and what we got 5 or so years ago, right? When this whole AI thing became a thing, right? The first thing we ever heard about it is it was one of the first systems to be used in an esports tournament called Dota 2 in the international. It was called OpenAI. It would essentially take control like any other player and fight one of the best esports players 1v1 against the other player, right? They wanted to demonstrate the architecture of this artificial intelligence and how it is able to learn on human input and imitate. Now, it feels like we've gone an entirely different way of the way how it gets perceived now, where now it can think and imagine whatever you prompt it, it essentially develops its own vision, right? And now we're using this specific technology as well for stuff in video games. I'm not talking about development in general, like using Gen AI for making variations of whatever visions you may have. But if we look at settings, you might have noticed, and probably accustomed to it by now, which is like a standard now, unfortunately, is stuff like... I'm so sorry, taking a little too long, but been kind of thinking. We have different anti-aliasing solutions. I remember we started with FXAA, which is more of a faster pass for finding edges when you see something on your screen, right? Let me just turn everything off in terms of anti-aliasing, and you'll be able to see yourself. I also have... I don't have DLSS, thank God, because I've been playing this game for the past week without DLSS and with at the beginning just to kind of see the difference, and I started to think, is this sacrifice in following optimization paths going to dictate how the AI tech is going to make us experience the game visually differently? It not like a conspiracy thing, so to say, but more like I would like to feel an expression of artists, directors, writers, and engineers to essentially give us a taste of the world in native, so to say, in native feel, like in native tongue, or in native format, or like native resolution, so to say. We have less and less games that are so well performant and you're able to play on hardware that is available right now without DLSS, without temporal solutions, without all that super resolution and downscaling back and stuff just to make jagged edges less visible. You can kind of see in this video right now, there are plenty of jagged edges like on this pole that is next to Arthur, right? And you see a lot of those artifacts that come from lighting where you can see some pixels literally trying to sample themselves here on the brim of his hat. Because we don't have anti-aliasing on at all, right? And this is a problem with computer graphics, especially in real-time rendering. We're trying to mask so many of these issues with something that is temporal, with something that is AI trying to find this pattern of artifacts and trying to mask it, especially with using ray trace lighting, ray trace shadows, and they have all of these patterns so common between each other that AI is able to recognize those patterns off and try to mask it, making it feel like, oh, they actually don't exist or anything like that, right? I have a huge problem with this. As an experience, it gets worse and worse because majority of cases, despite my quality presets here, especially being ultra, well, except particles, but it doesn't matter. Tessellation quality as well. The game can look absolutely amazing, absolutely great, absolutely fantastic. If we just go put everything on, and my FPS is quite consistent right now, despite me recording this right now. I'm enjoying this. This is over 60 FPS. Oh, shut up, uncle. Anyway, settings, you can see that despite with the VSync on with 1440p resolution, which is close to 4K because of my widescreen, right? This is all being run on 4080 Super, right? This is one of the most inaccessible cards in the market, but unless you save up and be able to get it for a really good deal, you'll still be able to get amazing experience without all these goodies added by Nvidia like DLSS or FSR or XeSS. Or temporary anti-aliasing stuff. I just want to show you the differences between all of these anti-aliasing solutions, right? So let's start with the first and the most popular one that was always the go-to for majority of games and majority of people on low-end machines. If I turn this on, apply changes, and I run around, what kind of difference do we see? Well, first of all, I'm not sure if you see it, but I do on my screen. I see a weird tear going vertically. I don't know if it's in the video. Yeah, but it should be somewhere like to the right of Arthur. I'll check the video after that anyway. But FXAA is a fast, approximate detection of any of the jagged edges. If you look behind Arthur and his pole and stuff, you see some jagged edges and stuff. This is fast. This is one pass that is incredibly fast, but it still does its job well, unless you have a very massive screen and you need to like, oh, I want everything perfect, right? It's literally, that thing is right in front of me. I'm trying to see every single detail, but I'm not trying to do it just to nitpick or anything, just to be one of those people sitting like armchair analysis or armchair game developers saying like, yeah, this is bad. Whatever, it's not 100% of the attention to the player, to the one who is playing this game, right? Yes, you can find it like, oh, this is weird, this is interesting. And as a game developer myself, I would be like, yeah, I can see how this is how does this behave? And unfortunately, that's what happens when you do some weird deformations and cloth simulation that was happening here, or the cloth shader that is trying to do all these waveform vertex offsets and stuff, blah blah blah. Anyway, we're not talking about incredible technicals and detail as game dev. I just wanted to find a middle ground between the game developer and the consumer. I am both. I love video games. I love making them, I love playing them, I love learning from how they were made in the past, I love learning how they are going to be made, but the latter is making me pretty upset. Anyway, we just looked at the FXAA. Let me just go back without every single anti-aliasing there is, and we can see the difference. Well, yeah, you can see jagged edges to like in the middle of the screen on the pole. And I'm just gonna go back to the graphics, and I want to go to the next anti-aliasing, which is wildly popular right now. Everybody uses this, everybody uses in like a AAA standard, is temporal anti-aliasing. It claims that it improves image quality by reusing previous frames. So you have a previous frame that was before the current one that you have on your screen, and it tries to find the pattern that is similar with the current one, and it does the same thing in the future one in a cycle. So it's procedural. It tries to find the patterns that are really good in the previous frame and tries to apply them on future frames by finding the patterns that match the pixels. Everything is pixel based. It's no longer acid base. It's no longer like vertex base. It's all pixels. All ray tracing depends on pixels, depends on data that is saved. It's all pixels. And that's where it gets absolutely annoying, because they think if we can work with pixels, it's a lot less data to work with, because it's just what your camera sees, but it completely ignores what's behind the camera. Sounds like a good thing at the same time, right? It's like, okay, I kind of want make sure that everything is performing in front of me, but at the same time you need to remember what's behind the camera that still contributes to the way how it looks on your camera, right? This Temporal anti-aliasing also says that it helps to reduce object edges appearing jagged or unexpectedly sharp. Again, it depends on how assets are optimized and how they were constructed in the first place before they got imported in the engine, applied with certain properties in order to keep it smooth, blah, blah, blah. TAA. You have presets like medium and high, right? I'm gonna put it on high, just to kind of see how it is. And you can see... I wish I had Steam open for this right now, but I can tell you that it's kind of trying to do its job. But if I play around, move around and stuff, I have a weird headache. I'm even looking at Arthur's face. I am playing on native 3440 by 1440 resolution. Every single hair strand feels smeared on his beard. I want to be able to see every single thing on his face, not smoothed out, not smeared, and his coat, the lack on coat and the fur that is in the neck of a color of the coat, it's missing. It feels like it's missing that noise that it's natural for it to be there. Again, temporal does not have any identifications for what kind of object this is, or what kind of like a texture this is, mask, and blah blah blah. It's all, it takes everything as a general rule of thumb. If I see it, I'll make it smoother, and I'll try to not make it too color matching in between, right? It's trying to do this job, but the reason why it's not good, it's because a lot of those details are missing now. So if I absolutely remove the anti-aliasing, you see what I mean? We are at native resolution, no DLSS, no anti-aliasing. Yes, you see those artifacts that come from translucent materials trying to find overdraw over other materials or overdraw over each one of the like fur in the shader, for example, right? Yeah, there are some blackouts here and there. Screen spaced ambient occlusion is trying to do its job by placing shadows in places where light cannot reach them realistically. Shut up, Dutch. And if I go to settings again and go to graphics, FXAA essentially would do amazing job here. This is the cheapest solution to keep majority of anti-aliasing done right, except for bigger objects. I'll be honest, I like it. This kind of a noise gives me an idea that there is fur, there is little details going on here. This is good, but because of this fast motion and motion capture and the frames are like kind of moving here and there a lot, yes, it's cheap, yes, it's fast, and it's not the best, right? Here's my most favorite one. We're finally getting to the point where I want to show my favorite type of anti-aliasing that is so underrated. This is MSAA specifically. MSAA, it's essentially multi-samples pixels, multi-samples frames on top of each other. And then as soon as it multi-samples every single frame on top of another, it gets the best result possible. If you're a 3D artist and you've ever done rendering or lighting in Blender cycles, for example, you can notice how it does rendering again and again and again of the same spot, depending on what your sample count is. And it does it for so long, making better and better and better and better iteration. At first, it will be low quality, and it gets better, 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 and better, right? So, multi-sample anti-aliasing is kind of what it is. It softens the edges of objects and other geometry. So it tries to... You will be able to set the multiplier for it, which I was talking about, the sample count. Right now, Red Dead Redemption has it at ×8 being the best. Let's start with ×2 just so you can kind of see the difference, right?
If you say so.
Wow! It does the job, and it's pretty cheap. I am still able to see those tiny bit jagged edges of the hair strands on his beard, on his collar, the fur collar that you can see here. I absolutely love this. Can we go first person? Well, I can't see much here, unfortunately, but if I go photo mode, you can kind of see what I mean. So, where can I zoom? Well, you can't see much, but it's... The full shader in Red Dead is not like the best, the most advanced, but it's one of the cheapest ways to represent the material that you're going for, right? And what it does. I see so much detail with MSAA, and it's just 2 times. Let's just switch it back to like 8 times. So you can kind of understand the range in quality that it can offer for you, right? Give me 8 times. Temporal. Anti-aliasing won't be the best for this. Yes, it's... You can see my frames are tanking a little bit. Excuse me for that. You can see my frames are tanking for it, but this is the best type of anti-aliasing that I can actually see myself. Look at the jagged edges on shadows on the top. Look at the jagged edges on the poles. Look at the jagged edges and on the beard. I can see all these details, differences in depth, differences in height. The fur retains its silhouette, and this is amazing. We need to improve on this specific technology rather than making a new one, which is essentially temporal anti-aliasing. What exactly is the problem with temporal aliasing? Well, it does basically the same thing. Well, not exactly the same thing, but what temporal does is it's trying to find the information in the previous frame and put it in the next frame, right? You can select the quality. It's all AI based as well. It's the same thing with DLSS or DLAA. Deep learning anti-aliasing, deep learning super sampling. It learns the images from those different resolutions and tries to match the data. It's like upscaling a low-scale image or vice versa, right? Because if you try to downscale the upscaling image, there will still be problems and mismatches in information of pixels and offsets of pixels. They still have to be matched, and AI is kind of trying to find this great correction. It's like you're trying to smooth out this specific crease while still keeping it really crusty, which essentially doesn't work like this way, you know? I don't like it because it's, imagine the fast motion on lower computer graphics. On lower motion, it's unnoticeable, but the moment you start going fast, you're playing a very fast-paced game where every single frame almost different in range, in frames and information, where your stuff is going to be, you will see a lot of ghosting going on. You will see a lot of mismatches in motion and the frame data. It really depends what your GPU is and what it's capable of, right? If you buy 40, you essentially get the best of RTX 40's favor in temporal stuff, like temporal anti-aliasing and super resolution and deep learning anti-aliasing, because majority of the RTX 40's infrastructure, like the half of it or majority of it, so to say, has a lot of power put into the AI itself, trying to perform its temporal solutions faster, but at the sacrifice of less clock speed on the actual render of the image, the actual render of assets, the actual render of GPU computed VFX. This is a problem. We really need to stop developing it further. We are on a perfect shape. We don't need more of this. We don't need to go further with this. We are at its peak. The problem is that now we are completely forgetting about the native data that we have to get from the game itself. You can notice that with temporal anti-aliasing, everything looks a lot smoothed out, a lot smeared, so to say. I can see less detail from a far distance of the grass. Like, this was really cool about older games, right? I wish I could show more in the example, but I think Red Dead would be the best highlight in what it can deliver with all of these different ways. I'm not turning on DLSS because, as you could see with MSAA, temporal anti-aliasing, it's a lot worse to run. It's a lot worse to run because it's reliant on deep learning downscaling, the super sampling, so to say, like DLSS, because it will remove those artifacts, those edges, those weird data. I can see a lot more crisp in this image. I like it. There are many people that may not agree with me on this, but if you play on PC, you want crisp. You want a lot more crust. Not many consoles can handle this. Not many consoles have those chips that are able to have that many teraflops like the GPU on the dedicated tower, right? And that's the problem. We instead of investing more into this, I assume it would be a much better solution to have the alternate pilot, like a co-pilot, which essentially is like, oh, you get all this data that is very crusty, let me just enhance it. It's like for post-production of outputting every single frame that you see it on here. But games like Starfield are still not able to output best image even with those methods available, because the game is flawed in the pipeline itself of the way how they produce their assets or how they engineer their game to get programmed on tick or next function, how heavy it is, how not. It's not exactly a problem with the engine, but my problem is still marketing games at 30 FPS like Starfield, especially for hardware that is Xbox Series X, that was supposed to be a powerhouse of consoles. For a cheaper price, you're still able to play at 60 FPS. Nope, game is still at 30 FPS. What the fuck is going on? We're still stuck in 2016 mindset. This is 2024. This is 8 years later. We are stuck with this mindset where people still can run games at 60 and 100 FPS. Let's make a solution that essentially makes it possible for them. Death Stranding has one of the best technologies, and a lot of things that I have in problems with today's development as well. It's like we're afraid of crust. It's like we are afraid to see the true technology of real time just to appeal to those who want to invest into looking something like realistic. And then I saw this video. Which is GTA San Andreas gameplay, but it's reimagined by AI. And that actually made me think for the past couple of days. Are we getting to the point where we're gonna make all those deep learning technologies dictate to us, players? Tell us players what are we supposed to see depending on what is our hardware if we are on PC? I would imagine it would be essentially monotonic on consoles because they all have their set hardware that they sell every unit. So it's like, it's so easy to maintain this player base as a game developer and engineer and a programmer and blah, blah, blah. Because you're essentially making it for one system that everyone has. It's like with iPhones. Everybody has the same iPhone. And even right now, they're releasing games like Resident Evil Village on iPhone using ray tracing, which is essentially kind of like a temporal solution for the game to be run on iPhone. But at the same time, there are a lot of issues with it still that it's essentially not appealing to it. I understand when it comes to those solutions, when you want to play on Asus ROG or Steam Deck, for example, right? You kind of need those systems because you kind of want them to run well on such small chips, which is essentially could be a powerhouse like a full ATX tower. So I'm just gonna play this video real quick just to kind of give my point.
Stop. Get down on your knees. Now down on your stomach. There you go.
My problem with this is that it feels so uncanny valley with so much data that the AI learns from internet that is available publicly, and the creators of those AIs just essentially justify their use because, like, oh, if it's on internet, it's public, right? There's going to be no problem with copyright. Absolutely, there will be a problem with copyright because technology goes forward so rapidly, so fast. The law, the copyright, the economy, nothing can keep up with it. Technological market, especially with computer graphics, is incredibly freaking fast in comparison with anything else that is run by humans, like the government and stuff. But that's not the point. My point is, we're getting so close for technology that optimizes our experience in gaming. Essentially, it's gonna turn into this where it's gonna tell us what it thinks we want to see, and it will be so goddamn inconsistent. And it's gonna go to the point where they will think like each game will have its own AI which will output that image we want it to, and I don't like it. this is not what game development started as and how it retains to be. This is scary. I would like to have artists make their own assets, follow the pipeline, the traditional pipeline of optimizations. I had this conversation not so long ago about Silent Hill, Silent Hill 2, and there was a very bad topology going on in Pyramid Head's head specifically, right? I can already look at it and tell this is Unreal Engine 5's Nanite, and I know exactly how this works because it virtualizes the geometry by reconstructing it into its own quads, its own triangles, using Nanite. This is what essentially they claim it does on the official Epic Games page. And the problem with Nanite, especially from my experience working on projects such as Kizazimoto, which if I go to my website and I click on what's available, this was a Disney Plus show where every single episode was done by different studios. Our episode Mokodze was done entirely in Unreal Engine 5.1. 5.2. It should be 5.2. Because that's when Lumen and Nanite got improved a lot at the time of its release. But I think we finished it at 5.1 either way back in 2 years ago. 2 years ago from August to November. I will have to double check anyway. We've done all of the lighting using Lumen, and majority of assets were being optimized by Nanite, and there were so many issues with the way how Nanite behaved, especially with our lighting system Lumen, where it doesn't require to have light maps, everything is just through ray tracing, everything is procedural, and that's where it gets really tricky, right? You tell the system to show how the camera is supposed to see it, right? You do all the settings and stuff. I feel like Lumen saves a lot of time, especially with this feature that they called Megalize that they just showed in a tech demo. I have my own gripe with this. It's like, dude, I absolutely am a big fan of having so many lights in order to make something pretty, especially in video games and animation, but we are trading the same treadmill. That's what really got me upset at the time of reveal. You can see we still have dithering issues when it fades in. You can see how it dithers here in reflection. You can see how many ghost ticks per frame when the temporal anti-aliasing and super resolution is trying to match all that pixel data together. It's just AI's job. AI's job is to imitate the greatest quality. It looks amazing. It looks awesome. Yes, but it works. It's not the best. Now people are crippled at making slow-paced games like how Epic Games is showing with this specific demo, where you walk really slowly in third person. The same thing in Fortnite. It's not as fast anymore because now it's less hectic. It's not like Team Fortress 2. It's not like Counter-Strike. It's not like Quake. It's not like Titanfall where the movement was up the ass. It was to the point where how can AI keep up with so much information per frame at 100 FPS or 120 FPS where people try to crank it up to 200? And it's like, we need to clamp the max FPS people can play with just so our optimizers can catch up with the data on frames in order to make every frame look good. My problem with majority of this technology is, yes, it looks amazing, but can majority of hardware even handle it in the first place when you do so many procedural calculations of so much information, which is at the separate pass. But back then, we optimized it the way we have to cache it. We have to cache all that information to files that makes games incredibly big, right? Red Dead itself, if we look how much it takes, Red Dead itself takes around 120 gigabytes for the amount of content it offers, variation of content, and also there isn't much of the light map data that we can talk about. There isn't even ray traced lighting either way. It's traditional lighting, but they use different probes in order to give different variations for the global illumination, especially at the setting where it's a day and night cycle, blah, blah, blah. But my point stands. We are trying to make, right now, with the technology that goes forward, I understand that we want smaller packaged games, like smaller in size packaged games. With Nanite, we essentially eliminate the variation of level of detail meshes because it all procedurally is going to be done calculated on GPU anyway. We're still stressing GPUs. We're still stressing CPUs in order to enjoy our experiences. Can we cache all this stuff? Why haven't we gone forward and made Groom possible? If we simulate it in real time in games, we still need to simulate it like in Blender on Maya or Houdini and export it as Alembics and import them with cached motions. Now we just have the cloth simulations and stuff, which is way cheap, way faster to process. It feels like the market is gonna be dumber and dumber. There are a lot more flawed games are coming out barely using this kind of a technology. I think the first game that came out with Nanite specifically, there was no Lumen used whatsoever because they didn't exactly know how to use it properly. But Nanite was used in Remnant 2, which still played well, but I had a lot of issues in the gameplay itself, where I had to essentially remove Nanite through a console variable or a default engine INI file, just so I am able to enjoy the game. But it was worse because they were using photorealistic megascans for terrains, and that was really pissing me off a little bit. You could just sculpt majority of terrains, right, which is essentially going to be optimized through instancing. But using megascans or photogrammetry assets without optimizing them, it's a lot longer to optimize them than making your own terrain, you know? There are so many ways to do this, but now it's like we're stressing our GPUs and CPUs more than we're supposed to. Especially with GPU power being cut, we could have a lot more native rendering, a lot of native resolution information than relying on AI. We should have, like, you know, 20% of AI in the GPU, 80% of the GPU. Still let the GPU output the best power possible to the image, not to the monitor, but also process all the meshes and all the textures outputs, right? But 20%, like, have it as a very tiny copilot, just an assistant. I understand when you do it for smaller consoles, just so we're able to play on the go at high quality. This is AMD Extreme Z1 processor. It's not the best, but FSR 3.1 is doing its job as much as it can. Playing Space Marine 2 on this thing, by the way, is pretty fun, even if it's 35 FPS. I do not mind, I do not complain, because I do not expect the battery to be a powerhouse like my power block on the PC itself, right? Giving so much voltage to my GPU and CPU and RAM. So anyway, it feels like we're kind of stuck. We're kind of stagnating right now. We're upset that we have to abandon what we've learned for the past 5 years, 10 years about producing assets, optimizing assets, and they're making the alternative where, oh, we're just going to make a machine that is going to essentially optimize everything for you already. And it's going to do it on every single person's machine through a procedure just to not let you cache anything, because caching equals bigger storage size, and bigger storage size is one of the things that people hate. GTA 5 was one of the most insane games that had so much required, like 130 gigabytes or something. I could be wrong, excuse me. Ark was probably the best example to show how to not even make your game, because you keep so many textures at 4K. And I have a big gripe with you, Ark, here. Because you don't need 4K in majority of assets to begin with for textures. And I understand where you had different level of details to do, but that's good. But you had so much that you could, you know, recycle sometimes too, but holy. Either way, next, and essentially with the new Ark, it's now Lumen Nanite, and did the required storage data go down? No, we're still at 155 gigabytes. It was 120 with Scorched Earth and Aberration on Survival Evolved, if I remember correctly. But it goes over 250 with all DLCs installed, or even 300 gigabytes, excuse me. Caching is fine, but you need to know what kind of how you have to produce, how you have to optimize your content, all the textures and UVs, the meshes, and variation of LODs. How many LODs do you want to have? It still outputs the end result of what you've produced, and having such deep learning technologies like temporal or deep learning, super sampling and stuff, it's, you know, we might get to the point like it is with GTA San Andreas here. Be careful how you produce. Be aware of the consistency. Be aware of the consistency of your art assets and other production assets that you have in your game, just to avoid this thing where you market one thing but you give entirely different thing to players, you know? This is where it gets sketchy. And I think we should retain what we have learned and developed for the past 20 to 30 years in especially game dev, computer graphics, and use what they provide optional rather than vanilla, or rather than what they put at default, like temporal anti-aliasing on default, nanite on default, virtual textures in default, blah blah blah. There are other ways to do it that do not require to stress your customers or your own GPU, CPU, just to have great experience playing a game, you know? This is why I've been playing Red Dead and other older games. So yeah, that was a bit of a ramble from me, but I kind of wanted to put my thought out there about what is there to expect from AAA market, especially with how everybody is moving to Unreal Engine right now. Yeah, I thought that would be one of my insights to show. Anyway, thank you very much for visiting my TED Talk. Hope you all have a great night, day, or morning.